Well, right off the start, I want to just say it is a huge pleasure to be chatting with you because, look, your films, you and your brother have made some bang ups over the years that have
Oh,
really struck a chord with me. Like, obviously, Rise of the Foot Soldier is one of those cult films that just hits hard every
yes.
time. But the other one too is A Lonely Place to Die is a movie that has never left me. I love it, adore it. Have that on Blu-ray somewhere in the background here. It's
Nice.
a pleasure to be chatting with you for real.
You too. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's really
No,
exciting.
a pleasure. Like Jericho Ridge, awesome. Just awesome. I loved it.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much.
It's a very self-contained, very taut, very tense kind of film. How long has this story sort of been floating around up there for?
I think I finished the first draft in I was going back and just double check. I think it was sometime in 2017.
Right.
It's one of the ones I wrote. I had another script I was trying to get made before this that was a bit more sort of sprawling, perhaps a bit more expansive, and it just wasn't quite. We came close a couple of times, but didn't quite get there. And so I was really thinking, like, look, first time filmmakers. I'm an editor. I must have cut 10 first time directors features, some of which worked great and some of which didn't work. And one of the things I sort of really conscious of is obviously when you're doing low budget, you have a compressed time frame, and you have not that much money. So if you've got 20 locations, trying to do 4 locations in a day, it's pretty brutal, and you don't really get to shoot the film how you imagine you get to shoot the film. You basically tear there in a van, get caught in traffic, arrive to location 20 minutes late, jump out, put the camera on the shoulder, shoot sort of late 80s, early 90s TV coverage,
Yeah.
wide, mid, a couple of close-ups. Oh, and we're off to the next location. Whereas if you can sit in one spot, you finally actually get the chance to maybe shoot it the way you want to, light it the way you want to, and also try and use, because obviously, one location films can be hard to keep visually interesting and to keep interesting. But if you can try and turn it into a pressure cooker, that's the ideal. And you just
Yeah.
set fire to the whole thing and watch it fucking explode. Yeah.
How did you find like you edited this one as well, yeah? How did you find editing your own?
I
You
didn't.
didn't.
I thought I was going to. So we had a very, very good editor called Sarah Pejek, who's brilliant, much earlier in her career than I am as an editor. But I always thought I'm editing my own film, and
Yeah.
I dug my heels in and I fought with people about it. And I thought we'll come back to London after the shoot. I'll give her 2 weeks to finish the assembly, and then I'll take over. But she was really good
Excellent.
and really efficient. And having to also, when you're doing a first time film, you're like your sort of anxiety levels are going up and down like a rocket. You're like, one day it's like that was pretty good, the next day you're like, this is absolutely terrible. And then sort of everything you sort of judge it so harshly sometimes because it's your
Yeah.
first one.
Yeah.
So like if I was cutting it myself, I think I'd just gone slowly mad in an edit suite for 12 weeks, ended up with a 2 minute long film and saying this is the only stuff that works.
But at the
Whereas
same time, yeah, go on. Sorry.
she was able to really bring some nuance. She's really good at cutting to reactions, and she came up with like quite a few really smart little cuts that I'm like, I know I never would have thought of that. And I just
Brilliant.
thought I loved the building the relationship and working on it together. And I'm probably more experienced doing action, so I can jump in there and really
Yeah.
be, that annoying gremlin over her shoulder. But then equally, I can just sit back and let her cook, and she's great.
So
So I never imagined I'd do that.
as an editor though, when you handball your film to someone else to cut, is there anxiety at first? Like, are you like, do you think I know exactly how I want this cut, and I'm not sure if I trust it in someone else's
No,
hands?
I'm in the edit every minute, and as an editor, I've always liked working on projects with directors who are engaged with the edit. You sometimes
Gotcha.
do an edit job, and they'll come in on a Monday and say, "Oh, I'll come in on Friday. Show me what you cut."
Yeah.
And those films never turn out too good.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm trying to stifle anyone creatively, but I think it's a back and forth. You're
Makes
working
sense.
together, and it just, yeah, you just don't go insane. I said 12 weeks in a room on your own when you've got quite a lot at stake, and you're just hoping this is going to come out okay. It's too much. It's too much for me.
I bet, I bet. One thing that really struck a chord with me, because I always think that there's not enough filmmakers that snag the viewer right at the start with some good music to really set the tone. And you
Right.
hit us with two bangers right out of the gate.
Yes.
Funkadelic and Liquid Limited. Um,
Yes.
I think you hit the tone immediately. You kind of gave it a bit of an exploitation feel at the same time with the credits and all that. Were they songs you had in mind right from the start, or
Liquid
did you
Limited
discover
was
them?
100%. That was one of those things I heard on the radio, and it's got that slightly, it's hip hop, but it feels slightly sort of rural America. And I'm just like, oh my God,
Yep.
that's an amazing sound. And just Shazammed it on the radio and had it on the sort of my Jericho Ridge Spotify playlist for however many years before we got to make the film. Funkadelic came quite late. We had another track in there for a while, but then
Yep.
just couldn't quite clear it. And then so I was working with the music supervisor, and he was just sending me reams of stuff, and it wasn't. And then as soon as you hear that track, you're like, oh my God, that's really, really cool. And the sort of wide imagery and the yellow font, there's a slight, well, there is a 70s vibe to it. And that's, two best decades for movies, in my opinion, the 70s and the 90s.
Yep.
And it was, yeah, suddenly bang. Yeah, because we don't have a lot of music in the film. There's those two songs, and then there's a song at the end, which is done by
Yep.
Gavin Rossdale from Bush.
Amazing.
He recorded an original song for us. But obviously, yeah, it was mostly score.
Yes. Well, I do think you really snag the viewer right out of the gate, as I said.
That's great
And
to
that's
hear.
important, I think. Speaking of sort of the 70s and 80s and all that kind of stuff, when you're preparing this production, do you have any influences in mind that you're leaning on right from the start, or are you trying to ignore the influences?
Well, I mean, the obvious influence everyone mentions is Assault on Precinct 13
Yep.
because it's a siege of a police station. So obviously, I'm a massive fan of that, and like any filmmaker worth their salt, I'm a huge John Carpenter fan,
Yeah,
as I'm sure are most people who are into movies.
of course.
But it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, I've got an idea. It's in the same, milieu. It's in the same. So it's one of those that I just didn't want to watch it for a
Mm.
while whilst I was developing this. I just sort of ignored that. And then you also think to yourself that, uh, Assault on Precinct 13 is really kind of a sort of remake-ish of Rio Bravo.
Yeah.
Even to the point where I just bought Rio Bravo on the 4K disc, which is I've
Yep.
never watched it before. It's amazing.
Stunning. Yep.
And you can watch it as a John Carpenter commentary. Like
100%. Yeah.
that's how interesting he is. But
Yeah.
I guess like my sort of thing, there's a lot of influences, obviously. But one of the things I sort of tried to figure out as an editor was just, when you're doing your first film, you're looking for so much inspiration. So I must have picked about 20 films and just loaded them into Premiere Pro and just sort of gone through them, just plucking out colors I like, shots I like, camera movements I like, and just creating these sort of 20-minute long sequences. I got about 8 of them. And then when you're feeling low, on the shoot and you're exhausted and you're feeling low and you just sit there and you're just mainlining shots that are just inspiring you. And so trying to use a bit of editing to help with the direction, really, just to keep your inspiration levels high, because obviously when you're shooting, you get quite tired. It's
Yeah.
pretty exhausting.
100%. I'm glad you said that because sometimes you ask that question. Some filmmakers don't like any sort of comparisons or anything like that. But
Oh no,
I love it. I think every film has it, and you can't deny
but
it.
I also think Assault on Precinct 13. It's 1976, am I right?
Yeah,
I think we could have another police station in a
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's
but
not the same. It's not the same. Different
no,
circumstances.
and it's one of the big differences is the sort of the POV in
Yeah,
terms of character. Like obviously Assault on Precinct 13, we're in there with all the different crew, and then we're jumping out and we're seeing the guys outside and all that sort of stuff. Whereas one of the things I sort of set myself very early on was this was going to be Tabby's story totally.
hmm
So, we're gonna every scene is her POV. So she has to drive every scene. We can't have scenes without her.
yeah,
And that obviously, when I was trying to figure out how we get away from her, that was sort of suddenly thinking dash cams, stuff like that, and that's how we use it.
yes,
Because
absolutely.
originally, when I think I first started writing it, all that Arnie Boo, when they go to the cabin and you have that whole standoff, that was kind of just phone calls, and I was like, I mean, that could probably work ish, but
Yeah,
it's way cooler if you can see it.
definitely, definitely. And Nikki Amikabed is fantastic in this. Was she your first choice to play Tabby? And also, did she always have a broken leg in the script?
She has a broken ankle in the script. Actually,
Yeah.
no, broken leg in the script, broken ankle in the film.
Yes, right.
Just trying to get a cast that would be long enough for her leg, and so an ankle boot was so much quicker than trying to put on a sort of fake plaster casting. And
Yeah.
in terms of budget, we couldn't have done that
Mm.
because we didn't have a lot of money. But yes, the ankle was one of the first things, and I just thought it's great to have her on the back foot, and then you find out later why it's broken, and then you sort of pay into all that. But
Yeah.
yeah, you want to have the character as many sort of disadvantages and have it as hard for them as possible. We went through a few different. Originally, we were planning to shoot this at a sort of higher budget level, and we went and location scouted Winnipeg in Manitoba, Canada,
Yep.
in November 2019. That's probably the coldest place I've ever been in my life.
I used to live in
Um,
Canada, so I know all about it.
yeah, like we got there and it's -16 and the wind's like 80 miles an hour. and you literally you go from the hotel to the and
And your
you
nose freezes.
the Canadian producer turns up wearing a sweater, and he's just like, "Ah, it's a dry cold. Don't worry." But then we were aiming to go into production in April 2020,
Mm,
and obviously
yep.
everything fell apart.
Yeah.
And we spent 2 years trying to like, where's the first place we can go into production? But then obviously as we're coming out of COVID, every other person in the world who's making a film or a TV series has the same idea.
Yep.
Suddenly you've got the streamers, you've got Disney throwing money around, trying to gather cast for a low budget film with a first time director is super hard. So we took ages and eventually decided to take the money we had previously raised and commit to going and shooting the film in Kosovo. And so
Yes.
we created a list of people we could afford to hire. And one of my producers, Alex, had seen Nikki in Luther and a couple of other things and was like saying, pay attention to her. And I did my research. I watched her and I thought, oh my God. Like I was watching scenes from a show called Quarry, which she only did one season of, which she's in. And she's like she is in everything. She's genuinely amazing.
Yes.
So yeah, we got hold of her, and I feel incredibly lucky. Actually, shooting in Kosovo turned out super well because we get to have like a proper 5 more days on the schedule. Which when you're shooting action, time is so valuable. And also in Kosovo, we got to build the sheriff's office, as opposed to sort of everywhere else we looked in the world, we'd have had to sort of find an existing structure and
Yeah.
adapt it, and it's never quite big enough, and the roofs aren't high enough, and you can't smash it up enough. And so having the control and the ability to build that, I mean, it was not insulated or anything, so we're all dying in there, and the window's about, and it's -12 outside. There's a couple of shots where she's inside, like, and you can see her breath, which no one else has noticed, but it was that cold.
Wow. I was going to ask if there are any advantages to shooting over in Kosovo. Obviously, there were, you've just explained, but were the opening shots Kosovo as well, or were they Canada?
Yes, no. So that, yeah, no. So again, we were looking for somewhere. So one of our Kosovo, I think we're the first international film production to shoot there,
Yeah.
and they're currently working on a tax credit, which I think is going to be 30%, which will be out possibly in a couple of months,
Cool.
which will make it much more. But so it was, one of our producers, a guy called Harvey Ascott, about the last 10 to 12 years, has been going out to Kosovo, shooting commercials, music videos. He made a short film out there in 2016 and got nominated for an Oscar, which is brilliant. All about the sort of Kosovan War. It's called Shock, SHOK. So he was like, well, I know this place. He's been out there long enough to know exactly who are the best people.
Mm,
And so we got all of them. And then we took some English crew out, like a director of photography, a first assistant director, stuff like that.
yep.
But it was like, again, you go out there, the landscapes, and they're really, really, really cool.
Yeah. Really
I
cool. I
guess
would
the only
never have
thing I
known.
started, when he mentioned Kosovo, I started Googling like what it looks like. And I love these images. And I Googled the temperature. And it said in winter it's 0, in summer it's 20. And I thought, perfect. It's the easiest, most. I don't know what the fuck I Googled because it's the coldest and hottest place in the entire world. It gets down to like -20 in winter. It gets up to 40 in summer. So yeah, I must have misspelled Kosovo. But yeah, it was great. So actually it was really cool. And obviously it's really fun also. People are very welcoming out there. They're very, they're very pleased to have people coming and investing and, bringing creativity and to their country. So they were super cool and very cool to work with.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting just backing track on Nikki for a moment. You look at her filmography around the same time as this film's been released. She did Knock at the Cabin, which is a very
Yes,
self-contained one-piece kind of
yes,
film, and she's doing a Zemeckis film that all takes place in one room as well. So she's like
yeah.
she's doing
She's
some good
probably the
stuff.
next thing. She probably just wants to expansive,
Yeah.
big mountains on the horizon, big widescreen.
Give me the
Just
next
wants to
Dances
get
with
out of,
Wolves.
she wants to
That's
get out of a room. Yeah.
and
No,
Zach
she is.
Morris. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think she's superb. I think we got very, very lucky to. I think that about all the cast really.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're shooting action. It's a compressed time frame. It's late nights. It's super cold. So it's as about as stressful as it can get. But they were honestly, to a person, the cast, the company of actors was superb. Really, really great, creative, and also very sort of not sympathetic, but very accepting of the fact this is my first time. And,
Yeah.
and I sort of think one of Nikki's main, apart from the fact she's a superb actress, a great person, she's unbelievably prepared and very creative. Like a lot of the film, when we're shooting, there's voices off screen, aren't there? So she's on the radio,
Yeah.
she's on the phone, she's talking to people, and we didn't have an actor on set, so I would have to play those roles, and we'd do 7 or 8 passes with me playing 3 characters, playing Mrs. DeLuca,
Huh.
playing her, and that doing different accents, and with the best I'm a shit actor. So her ability to carry a scene, ignore me, and deliver a performance that's superb is like doubly impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, she's so good. I thought to myself, like, Will must have really put her through hell because, like, she looks like she's in peril for
Yes,
sure.
yes, I did. It was sort of arrive on set. It's like roll around on the floor, get dusty, get filthy, and then you just think like, it was pretty harsh.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and Zach Morris was excellent too. I feel like you really got lucky with him because he's on the rise. Obviously, people know him from
Yes.
EastEnders, but he's recently been in Goosebumps, like which is a really fantastic new version.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you snatched him at the right time. Was he easy to get?
I think, well, I was going to say, yeah, well, he was one of the people that auditioned.
Mm,
And it's sort of, and I sort of, one of the reasons, A, his audition was brilliant, but B, there was a sort of something comforting about knowing he's done, I don't know, 250 episodes of it. He's been on a big set,
yeah,
probably twice the size of our set with a huge crew. He's
yeah,
not going to come out there and fall, you know, collapse under pressure. And that was kind of reliable. And he's really smart, really prepared, asks a lot of interesting, intelligent questions. And when I don't know the answer, I hold my hand up and we fix it.
yeah. That's
I
great.
think the other guy, because obviously we've got some established talent like Nick, but Solly McLeod as well, who
Hmm.
plays Walter. Yeah, I think about the same age as Zach. I feel they're both just in the
Yep.
ascendant, and it couldn't happen to two nicer, more talented people, you
Yeah, and
know?
this is the perfect kind of film. Like later down the road, when you look back at their IMDb, like it's nice to know they got their start in something like this, as far as features
Yeah,
go.
absolutely.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure. What compelled you to sort of step out and direct a feature for the first time? Was it an itch you felt you had to scratch after all these years of writing and editing?
Yeah, well, it's just been something I've kind of always wanted to do. Like, editing sort of became a day job just because setting up a film, raising finance is very very time consuming, very difficult. Whereas if you're an editor, you kind of walk onto a fully funded job and it's there, and then you come off it and you're bouncing between projects, thinking, "Wow, this must be easy to get stuff made," and then you try and do it yourself, and you find it very very difficult.
Yeah, yeah,
But this script was, as soon as I finished this script, people wanted to make it,
yeah.
which was a nice feeling because of the other script, it was going well, but it was just much harder to gather momentum with it. But yeah, it's always something I've wanted to do. And ended up, after a pretty tough 2 or 3 first days where I think I was like, never doing this again. Um, I just sort of, I think I found my feet and I just started to really enjoy the process. And then just sort of being across everything. Because, if you're an editor, if you're a writer, you surrender it and someone goes off and makes it. If you're an editor, you finish it and then someone else will marshal it through post. They'll do the sound, they'll do the visual effects, they'll do the coloring, the grade. And so actually being across all that, I really enjoy it. I love sound effects. I love visual effects. I love the music as well. Being across all of that was just a lot of fun.
Do you intend to direct more?
Absolutely. Yeah. Watch
Cool.
this space. Yeah. So I've got a couple of things I've written. I'm just putting out into the world. I've got an action film, a crime thriller, and I'm just started writing a horror film. And yeah, so I really, really want to do it again. Absolutely. And yeah, and actually
Yes.
watching this, like watching people's reactions to this, because also having been like a writer and an editor, if something doesn't come out right, you can always sort of hide behind someone and go, well, they fucked it up, not me. So Galway was our first festival. I always imagine like here's the dream. You write the film, you make the film, you put the film on a shelf, no one ever watches it, and then someone you do the next one, and it's the world's most expensive hobby. And so when we first went to Galway last summer, I mean, I can't describe to you the raw terror of actually having to sit down and watch it with an audience for the first time. Like I
I
wanted to
bet.
melt into my seat. And then they started getting into it and making the right noises and enjoying it and gasping and laughing. And suddenly I was like, oh, actually, no, there is something to this audience thing. And having done a few festivals now, I think you can actually learn quite a lot about filmmaking from watching an audience. So a film like this is very tense. Like people are really, I find, like really ready to laugh. Like you throw even an approximation of a joke towards an audience after a very tense scene,
Yeah,
and they jump on it, and that's so satisfying to watch that work. And it's sort of, I feel it's something you could turn up like next time out of the gate. So I
absolutely.
know I felt I really learned something going watching with I've watched it with maybe 20 different audiences now, and you
Very
do learn.
cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
I'm glad that you intend to make more because I've said to my podcast co-host weeks ago that you and your brother to me have always been like the British Coen brothers, and
yeah,
it's funny. It's true, and it's funny how recently Ethan Coen's has broken out and gone his own way to direct
yes,
some films. So
yeah.
like you're on the right course, and you're about 20 years ahead of him. So
Nice one. Yeah, Drive Away Dolls. Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
It's
Looking
good.
forward.
It's good.
Is it?
Um, yeah, I love it. I love it. Its actual title was Drive Away Dykes, but the
Yikes, I
studio wouldn't
know
let him get it through. But if you
they
watch the
changed
film,
it.
they have a cheeky, middle finger to the studio in the movie. So it's
Oh,
a good
do
one.
they? Nice.
It
Good
is a
for
good one.
them.
One of the things I think is the best ingredient for an action thriller is a nice tight running time, and you've really nailed it with 90 minutes and less. I think you're 87 minutes or something like that.
Seven,
Um,
yeah.
and that's perfect. Like, do you have any of your own self-imposed rules for how action thriller should be?
Well, I'm an editor, so I take that perspective to writing. Oftentimes I'm very conscious of transitions between scenes, and I'm very conscious of, like, if you see a 5-page dialogue scene, I know that once actors get hold of that, that's 8 minutes.
Yep,
And you're sitting there, you've got an 8-minute scene, and it doesn't work, and you have to cut it down till it stops making sense, and it's just component parts. And it's probably better to, I sort of think, really, to do as much cutting as you can before you step on set and waste any
sure.
time shooting stuff
Makes
you're not going
sense.
to need. So, like, for instance, this film, having been an editor and only really shooting what I wanted or needed, I reckon there's maybe 5 or 6 shots we actually shot that aren't in the film. So, working with Rory, we were very disciplined about that. And I think that is probably from an editing background. Just being conscious of just sitting in great big flabby scenes and just being like, we've got to get out of here. It's
Yeah.
And also, yeah, one thing I do feel we're definitely going through, some films hold their length, of course. And I don't want to, but I think that we're definitely going through a period where I think a lot of action films are coming in up to an hour too long. And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
especially if you're a VFX, super VFX heavy show, you can cut $40 million off your budget by just cutting some pages and being
I do
disciplined.
I do wish that some of the bigger studios would listen to the audience because that's a common, complaint that things are too long these days, and the studios will then argue, well, you will binge watch a show on streaming, so you've got the tolerance for it. But they're two different kinds of forms of
Totally. And
entertainment.
also, I just think, yeah, a good 90-minute film, I always think, is an absolute treat, you know?
Bloody oath. Yep.
Obviously, some things deserve their length, totally. But I just, something like this, especially one location, I think this is 2 hours long and it's going to be, it just feels
Yep.
ridiculous. And
Yep.
also, they're waiting for reinforcements to arrive. If they're waiting for an hour, it just feels crazy. If they're waiting for half an hour, I can buy it.
That's right. And if they need the piss, you've given them enough time to wait and then they can go off and do it.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
before I wind this up, I like to sort of end these sort of chats with a little bit of, some get to know yous. And I'm wondering, what are the type of movies you gravitate towards in your downtime?
I definitely, it's sort of crime action genre, really. I'm a genre, but really, but all sorts, really. Crime, action, horror, stuff like that. I really, really dig. I think probably my favorite 3 films are The Wild Bunch,
Haha.
Goodfellas, and La Haine. So quite a diverse group of films, but I just,
Yeah,
all sorts. But I love a good action film. I love a crime thriller, that sort of stuff. Horror, I'm getting more and more into.
very cool.
Yeah, I saw a film last year that blew my mind. I don't know if you've seen When Evil Lurks, Argentine
Oh,
horror,
it's the best horror film of last year.
right?
Like, yeah,
I
universe
mean,
building is incredible in that.
that was it went so hard, and I was just like,
Yeah,
I didn't know you could go that hard and still keep people on board, like, without it being gratuitous or disgusting or whatever. But I loved that. Thought it was
yeah.
such a smart
It
film,
we
beautifully made,
the
beautifully acted.
guy I co-host the podcast with works for Monster Fest down here in Melbourne, and they screened that as their opening night film, and the audience reaction was just
Insane.
incredible. But
Yes.
we were talking about that film, and it's the universe building in that film is so great that it
Yes.
could be a franchise. You don't want it to be, but
Totally.
it could sustain another couple
Yeah.
of installments easily.
And they don't give you everything you need. They're just like, we're just going to accept that this is the way the world is, and you sort of
Yes.
catch up around it. We're not going to explain the possess. They're just there. This
Yep.
is the world we've created, and we're just going to get on with it, and you come on board and figure it
Yeah,
out,
and that's
which
kind
I
of why I
love.
don't want more installments because I don't want to know too much. Like I just love
Yes.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
ambiguity of
mystery
it.
is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And obviously filmmaking is in your blood. I'm wondering, was there a film in particular when you're younger that sort of triggered you to want to pursue it as a career?
Yeah, one of the ones that blew my mind earlier, really, like, when you sit down and you watch a film twice in a row, was
Yep.
Goodfellas. When I first watched that, must have been about 16, 17. Actually, no, it was also, I went through a massive John Woo Hong Kong phase as a teenager. I think that's what delivered me into action filmmaking and a real passion for it. And so was really across that, buying all the old crappy,
Ah, awesome.
really awful picture quality VHS cassettes, which looked like dog shit, but God, I love
Yeah, no, the
you know.
best. I had the pleasure of interviewing him a couple of months ago for his new film Silent Night, and oh my God, the guy's a master. And that film, Silent Night, look, I didn't love the film, but it's like it's a silent action film, which is just
Yes,
remarkable. Like very, very
right, yeah.
interesting. Cool. Well, awesome. I've had such a great time having the opportunity to chat with you, and I do genuinely
Yeah, you
love the
too,
film, and I
man.
love your work, mate. So thank
Thank you
you
so
for
much.
thank you for the time, and I hope everybody that's listening or watching this goes and finds it and watches it.
So do I. That would be awesome. Yeah.
Well, I might be in a little bit of trouble, Mom. What did you do?
What are you doing here? You should be resting.
Eddie said he needs me writing dispatch. I figured you guys had some kind of emergency.
We just had a murder investigation drop right in our laps. Someone out there sending a message.
I don't like the thought of you being here alone, unarmed.
I can handle myself.
That's Jim Denton.
You know him?
I've seen him around, I guess.
Go ahead, dispatch.
Suspect has escaped custody.
Out of the building, Cabby, right now.
This is W. Temple Sheriff's Office, Jericho Ridge. We got active shooters on the scene, requesting backup. Down on the floor now. Do exactly as I say. There are men outside. They have guns. Backup's on the way. We just have to hold out till they arrive, okay?
I need to tell you something, Mom. They've come back here to finish me off, too.
How am I supposed to believe in you and every word out of your mouth? It's a goddamn lie.
Come on out and I won't kill the kid.
Get down!
They're coming.
I can protect you, Monty.
All you've ever done is protect me.
Run!